Great. Thanks. Thank you for joining us and thank you for taking the time. It's my pleasure to have this chat with you.
Thank you, Amit, for having me here. It's always good to be at Elevation. The one of the early folks who got into content and dating and I think everything social. So yeah, it's good to be here almost after 10 years, still with Elevation and building it out.
No, our pleasure. I think we've had the luxury of standing on the shoulders of giants, so our pleasure. But Ankush, to kick off, I think you saw some of what we spoke about, right? And I think you've really seen this journey for a long time. In fact, what I was talking about, which is India, this narrative, we were just the people factory of the world to businesses being built at scale. You've seen that journey. You've lived that journey as well. Actually, first question fairly open-ended. You saw some of what we spoke about, but what is your reflection? How do you see this India story playing out? Do you truly think something is changing? And in your perspective, how do you articulate that?
Yeah, I think India has changed dramatically since we started. So we started in 2015, pre-Geo world. It was a completely different world. No Geo, no UPI. Very early days to even think that you will have a social content industry in India, because it was always about American companies, right? So I think we've really come a long way. I think we as a company have learned a lot in that journey. So we started by like solving the sharing need for the country, where we saw WhatsApp groups were flooded with content. People want to share good mornings and jokes and other content every single day, and the large American platforms are not solving it. So we jumped in, started building a sharing app. Uh, Again, it was very hard to raise capital, so we just kept working on the virality of the shareable content. Very soon we realized virality can get you only so far, and to further grow DAO, you have to figure on retention. And this being a pure tech business, right? This is like there's no feet on street. So how do you drive retention? Right? It comes down to product, and then further, if you dive deep in our business, it went into recommender systems. So can you build a really good recommender system, because it's essentially a feed of content? Can I keep the user hooked on to watch the next video after they've watched like already 5 videos, right? So it gets to that. Once you get there, you start building the algos, you realize it's a different world, and you, no matter how much capital you raise, you can't hope to beat Meta in ByteDance on that game. So again, you have to then figure out what do I do if not that. For us, that journey then went into building those chat room communities, because we were like, we can build maybe a 99th percentile Rexes. So I mean, we got the team in London, really good folks, but you don't want to be competing with the giants on that axis. So change the axis, and therefore we got the chat room communities to work. Eventually, it turned out to be a really good lever to monetize as well. And that was the other learning. Like you've raised so much capital, got the traffic, you put on ads, and it's lower than what you imagined, the ARPUs, and it takes a lot of time. And there again, the usual Silicon Valley thing, right? Get the eyeballs, put the ads, make money, and life is good after that. Doesn't work in India. So again, a hard realization right in the middle of when we are burning so much is like, only ads is not great. We have to figure how to monetize. Luckily for us, we had already built chat rooms. So we started monetizing that. And today, I think we have roughly a half-half split of ads and micro payments, monetizing share chat. So yeah, I mean, then that happened. So I think we've come a long way. I was looking at some of the formats, the new formats you guys were discussing. Again, a very exciting place, right? For India to think about episodic content, think about interactive content. I truly believe that will all happen. But I think we'll have to have a very, very clear lens on monetization. I think in India, a lot of Silicon Valley companies, the philosophy, get the eyeballs and make the money, does not work in India. So you have to be slightly more skeptical on just testing out the ARPU potential before you just go like all in, starting to burn capital on that.
No, absolutely. I think very, very valuable. And actually, through the conversation, would love to uncover exactly these points you spoke about. So, would come back to some of these. But just again, stepping back from a consumer wallet perspective, because a lot of times I think the narrative in India was just sort of finishing there of saying, look, and you were the pioneers of building for Bharat before Bharat became a cool thing, right? So you guys really went to a journey where that audience was not understood, and then trying to actually sell like content and social to them, where you know. But what do you think from a consumer opportunity? Is the wallet there? Like if you really crack formats, what do you feel about that now, having seen this world?
I mean, we are a large company. You put any tiny percentage on top of it, you'll still get a big number on users, right? So there is appetite. But I think, again, I'll give you a very interesting anecdote. When we started, we were about to start monetizing through ads. I think this is 2021 sort of time frame. We actually had one of the large consulting firms, I won't take the name. And we're like, tell us what should be the first few verticals we should go after. And they're like, you're into digital ads, biggest spenders are your Flipkart, Amazon, get them. E-commerce is the right to win. And we were like, what about like FMCG? It looks like it's a mass product. We said, don't bother there. It's very branding. You're a social media. Turns out, 3 years later, FMCG is far, far bigger. E-commerce is much lower in our ad spends. So I think this market sort of teaches you, humbles you in ways that the smartest of consulting firms, even if you get them, they won't help you, right? So, I mean, there is potential. If you go with ad-supported route, I think you have to be very true to what is really Bharat consuming at scale. It'll turn out to be FMCG, automobile, categories of that mass consumption, where digital payments will be a smaller portion, still growing. But if you want to make the bucks right now, you have to go for the massy categories on advertisement. When you come to microtransactions, I think there is a lot of potential even in tier 2, tier 3. So every city will have like the top 1%, which is like with a very high paying capacity. And your job is to find that cohort. It's not like all the money lies or all the paying capacity lies in tier 1. India is very, very fragmented. Every city will have that top 1%, 2% who would pay, like, we see that on ShareChat. The top guys pay like 10 lakhs a month just to gift on streamers. And he's like a small shopkeeper. He's probably with a rich family, but he's a shopkeeper himself, and he spends like crazy money. And some small town in Rajasthan. So you will have those people, very distributed. Although you can't hope to capture like a large market with just one state, so you have to go pan-India. But you will find pockets where you'll have those power users, the whales, who will give you the money on your micropayment business models.
Got it. Wow, those are big numbers, but very exciting. I think one question which I'm sure like a lot of folks in this room are thinking about, and we think about very deeply as well, is when you're starting out today in terms of building a social content business, classically PMF meant get scale, get growth, get engagement, get retention. Now you mentioned think monetization first. One, I think you gave a glimpse into that journey for you, but what was that journey of finding, like how should we even define PMF? Is monetization a part of PMF1? And I know that evolves over time. So that's one, like would love to get a little bit of your take from your journey. But then today, how do you think founders should think about it, right? What is really PMF? Should it be more growth, engagement, retention? Should it be monetization? Some of that, would love to get your take.
I mean, the hard reality is that the Silicon Valley playbook will not work. So you have to get retention, engagement, and the traffic right, because otherwise there's no monetization. But you also need to test out the monetization. There are countless examples in India of companies that during the Bharat wave started building business models, right? I know a few companies personally who built crazy traffic, amazing retention, but ended up going nowhere because they could not figure monetization. So in India, if you're building for Bharat specifically, make sure you're not chasing monetization because, I mean, you want to get the traffic first if that's your business model. But before you go all in, just test the waters. Don't take any assumptions that, like we would take, right? Meta is at $5 ARPU. I mean, just to put a haircut and take that number. I mean, India is very different. So I mean, just test out waters before you go all in. That's what how I would summarize it.
And you mean even at early days, because at some point, look, a lot of your growth would just be defined by really the revenue, right?
Yes, I mean, a lot of business models will be engagement first, monetization later, and you'll get the money, you'll get VCs to back you. But as a founder, it's your job to figure the path forward, right? So make sure there is some bandwidth to understand what's the potential. Like in our case, for the first 4 years, we only thought ads is going to be the answer. we very quickly figured ads is not the entire answer, and we quickly got microtransactions. And we jumped on the microtransaction bandwagon in 2020 when nobody even was thinking about it. So you have to be very quick, honest to yourself. Can this sort of, can this one revenue line really over long term give you all the money you want, or you should be like trying to figure out other ways to monetize? So I think for India, you have to work that extra bit hard compared to an American company to figure the monetization and have different revenue streams versus just having one. If your business model is on free eyeballs, in that case.
Very interesting. I think our founders are ready for the bit of the harder journey. But what I'm hearing you say is, look, I think there's almost this balancing act you need to do on both sides. Because the one question I think founders often struggle with is saying, look, monetization at the end of the day is also friction. So I'm giving up on some level of growth if I push the pedal too hard on that. At some point, while that is true, I think your larger point is saying, look, is there real propensity to pay this ad? So get that answer quickly, and then you might choose to prioritize growth, do monetization again, but you have to do that balancing act much more sharply. But actually, I would love to talk about microtransactions, and I think you guys were, like you said, you were the pioneers in microtransactions before people were thinking about it. So talk a little bit through that journey, right? You said, look, for a long time you thought ads was the game, then you realized that was not. How do you do that trade-off? Because you have only a certain, let's say, a finite amount of eyeballs, and you can choose to monetize them in one channel versus the other. So how do you take those decisions? How did you think about some of those when you were opening up?
I think, so the first micropayments business model for us, which still continues, is the chat rooms model on ShareChat. So essentially you have a 8-membered audio slot group where you can have audio interactions with each other and people can gift. So we started this right when we heard lockdown is getting announced. We thought this is a great, so we were anyways thinking, how do we diversify from content because of all the fight with ByteDance? We felt this is a great entry point where when people migrate back to their hometowns, they'll feel lonely, they would want to make friends. We can enter there and around our hashtags. So if you've seen ShareChat where the content is organized around hashtags, we were like, we can build really strong communities around those hashtags of like-minded people coming together and making friends. We introduced gifting, but I think for some time we did not even, so it was not that you pay to buy coins and gift, it was sort of you earn it by using the app. But we realized that people were so hooked on to this whole model of gifting your favorite creator that we introduced, that, okay, now you can buy coins. You don't have to use the app like 7 days a week to earn coins, you can just buy coins. And that then just took off from there. I think how we look at the whole friction piece of how do you insert along with ads, I think that's a very big part of what we do as a company. There's an entire team that's dedicated. We call it internally the feed marketplace team. Essentially, the highest traffic real estate for us on the app is the feed, right? So everybody wants a pie of that. They want to insert their widget, their chat room inside it. And we have to balance this whole trade-off where if you insert too many of chat rooms and not the organic content, your views per DAO will fall, attention will fall. So I mean, investing in a very, very strong experimentation framework, having a dedicated team to do these marketplace trade-offs is very critical. I think once you have signed up to be on the revenue journey, I can tell you it's a one-way street. You can say I'll be like slowly ramping up. You can, if you really want to get into revenue, assume it's one-way street. Once you're into it, you will have to day in, day out think about it. And invest behind experimentation, invest behind having that team, which will measure the trade-offs. Then you define the framework. And it's very important because when you have a large team, every person in the company should know what is the metric I need to move for this change to be shipped. So for us, last 2 years, as we were going through profitability, we had a 6-month contribution margin goal. Do any change you want in the app, measure through an A/B, project your 6-month contribution margin. If it's positive, ship it. If it's not positive, it's a no-go. And when I say contribution, you have to measure revenue uplift, server cost, subtract that, like do an entire P&L of that one single change, how will that pan out 6 months later? And entire team had that clarity. So with that, I think we started injecting in Moj a lot of lives. We figured it's overdone. We cut it back. So having that machinery in place, that experimentation in place, a very strong North Star, just makes it easier. And it's always going to be a friction. It's never a free revenue that you get from engagement. You will have to be fine living with some drop, as long as in the long term it sort of adds more value to the company.
Got it. No, very, very fascinating insights. And how do you today, and this might be getting a little tactical, but then how do you, from your vantage point, right, sort of manage these trade-offs? Like you're saying, look, in the short term, I introduce a chat module in the feed, and there's a finite amount of feed real estate I have. Maybe there's a short-term dip, but the model say it'll come back. But then there are two different business owners who have differing KPIs. Somebody's increasing ad revenue, somebody's trying to run this new business line. So there are constant trade-offs at play. How do you, as a leader, as an org, manage?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a big problem. We have a maker checker thing in the company. So I mean, the decision science team is the neutral party, the team that runs experimentation framework. So any large change where there's a conflict, I mean, the North Star is set 6 months contribution margin. You can have different assumptions going behind it, which can be debated, but the North Star is same. So anything and everything has to pass through that AB framework to show that there's a 6-month uplift. And if it is there, then it might be revenue loss. So we have actually, as we have worked on, let's say, cutting server costs, making it more efficient, right? We've actually scaled back ad load. Because what made sense 6 months ago, because of higher server cost, now does not make sense. Because we are very, very efficient in serving content. Therefore, we are less willing to take like blocking ads, for example. So it might also keep changing with time, just that if you keep the North Star same, strong experimentation, have a neutral person team in the room, it sort of takes care of itself. And I would want to be the last person to jump into meetings and say, do this, do that. The system has to work on its own. So you have to have a neutral team which sort of keeps everyone honest in the room.
Very interesting. So system has to work, the data has the final say, and hopefully that sort of grounds everybody to what is real. I guess one thing you spoke about a little bit, or one trade-off, I'm sure founders often think about, I encounter very frequently in sort of, some of the younger portfolio companies I work with, is, this balancing sort of freemium usage with, how deeply do you want to push, right? And, for a lot of founders, it's a hard decision to give up users, right? Because you've worked hard to get them on the platform, they're engaging, they're retaining, right? But you're probably not discovering today a path to monetizing them as efficiently. So how hard do you push? How do you balance sort of premium usage, experience? Server cost is a very, very real thing. But how should founders think about some of those traps they find themselves in today?
Yeah, I think for a large part of a company's life, people don't go as deep to care about that part where there's a tiny cohort which you need to monetize better. But I think as you grow and scale, you end up in that, especially when you get to the profitability treadmill. Then you go deep into everything and figure. I think for us, what we figured was there were a lot of people who were not going to convert to a micropayment user. Their ad fill rates were lower compared to other people. So how do you do it? Do you just cut them out of the platform? Because
fill rates were lower because they were not a relevant TG for a lot of the brands?
Yes. So both first-party and third-party networks did not show ads to them. Serve ads them. So over a long term, I mean, it sort of balances out. You figure who's going to eventually buy the product, not buy the product. So the fill rates sort of become a reflection of the paying capacity after some point. So for that particular cohort, maybe 5% people, what do you do? And they'll be consuming a lot of content. And because they don't have fill rates, imagine they don't get ads. So their experience is super, super good. Like no ads, just keep watching videos. So I think for us, when we went deep, we decided not to cut them out. But we made the entire investment behind recommending them content, which is the biggest part of our cost, right? Much lower. So for most people, we will have like a 2-stage, 1 deep learning ranker, 1 recall. For these guys, you'll only have the recall. We'll not have the deep learning ranker because it's very expensive to do inference on that and serve these users. So you immediately cut the input cost by half. and then they become profitable. So I think you'll find creative ways in each business model that if you can make for a particular cohort of users your input cost much lower, just let them be, because eventually they are sharing content, it's going viral on WhatsApp. There is some goodness to just having humans, even if they can't, monetize on day one, right? So find out your levers where you could sort of make them almost break even, and try to extract more goodness in terms of sharing. And in fact, just the machine learning data we get, right? So when they're consuming full watching data, that's actually helping us recommend content better to others. There are some unmeasurable goodness that you have by having larger people on the platform. So try to keep it as much as possible while like tactically finding ways to reduce cost of serving them.
Very interesting. I think on this sort of having a larger base, look, one is sort of the core product, like you're saying, it works. Sharing is happening, people are talking about it, there's goodness that's coming out. Specifically on ads, one aspect I wanted to touch upon is, and which is talking a little bit now from the supply side, right? Because a lot of these monetization models today, especially when we talk micropayments, when we talk subscription, they're contained in the sense as a user, I have agency to do this. But in ads, you have a third party, which is this advertiser. And then you spoke about learnings there of saying e-commerce sounded like the best client, but turns out FMCG is a better client. Can you maybe talk about that ad world a little bit? I think, very few of us have seen the ad world at scale, right? So what does the supply side look like? How much does scale matter? But how is ads how do you run a really efficient ads business?
Yeah, I think ads is a different world altogether. I think, joking to somebody, I signed up to build a B2C company. Turns out it's a B2B company. And if you go and talk to all your large FMCG CMOs and wine and dine and do all of that, which is very B2B.
Enterprise sales.
Yeah. So I mean, it's you have to invest a lot behind it, and there are different forms of advertisement, right? You have brand advertisement, you have direct response, performance-led advertisement, and this is a very old industry in internet age. So a lot has been already done. So you're just catching up to Meta and YouTube for the first few years. And I think you'll have to, I think the most important thing ends up being building trust with the advertisers, because I mean this industry, ads industry, is also very prone to a lot of people coming, frivolous clicks, impressions, and you would like once you enter the industry, you will see there are so many players whose only job is to make sure that the advertisers don't lose money on fraudulent things. So I think building that trust, and I think we've been working with all partners, right, who measure and verify if the views are happening, clicks are happening. And through that, I think we've been able to build trust that when you give us X crore rupees for such impressions, viewability, frequency, it actually gets delivered on the platform. So I think it's a long journey. You have to build trust with advertisers. Once you're there with branding, then you start with performance. That's again a very algorithmic game where you have to deliver an install target cost or a transaction target cost to the end client. That becomes a very different game, which is more tech, more product, because the marketeer is like, just get me an install at 10 rupees and I don't care. So that's a very different world. But you usually start with branding because it's sort of easier. You don't have to compete very hard with Meta and YouTube. And then you jump onto performance. And that's been a journey that we have been following.
And is there a certain scale you absolutely need to get to before it becomes... what I'm trying to uncover here is, as founders, will we get to wrong insights if we try to measure that too soon?
Yeah, I think for advertisement, you should be a scaled out company because, especially for branding, right? You go to a FMCG guy, they will have a reach requirement for, let's say, males in UP. And if your number is not like half or 1/3 of Meta, you're not in the room. So reach, more than anything else, matters to a lot of these branding people. Like we get a lot of these campaigns on phone launches. So if Samsung launches a new phone, we get a roadblock. So all our MAUs get that first screen pay, that advertisement. Again, if you go and say, I have 1 million MAU, you're not in the room. If you go and say, I have a 200 million MAU, then you're talking and they're interested. So especially for branding ads, I would say scale is very important. For performance also, I would say, because it's so expensive to build that, you would not want to invest unless you're a very large platform. So yeah, I would say scale is very important if you're entering ads.
Got it. Very, very fascinating, Ankush. I think last couple of things I want to pick your brain on and then open to the room. But just stepping back sort of from the monetization conversation, I guess one area where I would love to get your thought is, look, now with AI moving so fast, one school of thought is the entire world of creation and content will get disrupted, right? Like, will creators continue to be relevant? Will I just get AI to generate content I want at scale with infinite velocity? What is your take of this? Like, how will AI disrupt the social and content world?
I think AI will have a very significant impact in how content is generated. I think the analogy there is having smartphones and camera on your phone disrupted content because it made content generation very simple. And if you have the ability to put effects and background music, which TikTok enabled, it sort of gets you to build high engaging content, even as a commoner. I think AI is just one more step in that direction where if I'm not, let's say, a very presentable person, so creating my face content will not work. But I am creative, so I can prompt AI machine to generate a story that I like, that I feel audience will like. Again, you have empowered that person who could not have created content for that cheap in the current world to now be able to do that in the future world. So I think whether would it be entirely AI generated or creator led AI generated, I think that's a debate to be figured. I still feel you'll need a human in the loop to just tie things together and craft the story that they want to present. But you have enabled 10x more humans to do it with AI. So it will lead to a massive explosion of content on the internet. And that will change how social media works, how creator economics work. I think content is going to get very cheap. Content production is going to get very cheap. So it changes a lot of things, but I truly feel AI will have a massive, massive impact in how content is generated on the internet.
So imminent line of sight to significantly more content velocity, maybe from a user side, a lot more personalization because you can just feed me a lot more. And then for businesses, very different economics, or for creators, very, very different economics. But these seem more imminent. And then I guess the big question which is looming is, at what point do you not need a human in the loop? So I just tell this AI that this is what I like. I guess this is a larger debate around creators and artists. But
I mean, removing human in the loop is not even important, right? I mean, if you 10x the number of creators, that itself is a big change. Maybe we'll be there in 5 years, and then we can talk about how do you remove human in the loop. But I think even that is very profound, a change that's about to happen to us.
yeah, I think the running joke in our team is at some point my AI persona is on a social network with your AI persona. They have their own conversations. We probably don't know each other, but let's see how the world evolves. Perfect. I think last question, at least from my side, Ankush, for you is, we spoke about a bunch of things where we think, exciting new things will get built. We have a room full of, builders who are excited about the future. What are some things which sort of jump out to you as saying, look, this is where you see opportunities, you would love for people to go build in those areas, you see obvious value pools being built out, but some ideas maybe from you?
Yeah, I think we've been thinking about this a lot. We know for a fact that content production cost will come down dramatically because of AI. I feel India's media industry in some way constrained with that. That the cost of production is really high for, can you get a Bahubali out quickly, for example? You'll probably not, right? We've had the recent thing of Dharma production getting sold because, and then now you hear from Karan Johar that it's probably not about building large budget movies in India. You have to cut the budgets, build mid-size budget. So media in a way is constrained by cost of production. And if we are sure that AI will get this cost down, then there are going to be a lot of business models which don't make sense today because of that input cost, which will start making sense in the near future. I think episodic content is one of the formats in that lens, right? You talked about numbers of Reel Short making 200 million, but they burn a crazy amount of money. So if you want to get to that revenue in India, you'll be burning crazy amount of money today. So over time, you have to figure how to get AI to lower that cost. The format works, people will engage, but they won't pay for that as much that you can.
It's still a studio where this is being
shot. Yeah. So one way to think about it would be find current media opportunities that work for the super premium, work for Americans, but don't work for Indians, which can get disrupted by AI and the cost can come down. You would have, that will be a good sort of question that you pose and you'll get a lot of good ideas of that.
Perfect. Super. With that, I think would love to open up to questions for the audience. How much time do we have?
Thank you for the session. Recently, we saw MapMy India was building a couple of cool tech, and at the same time, Google slashed their Maps platform fees by 80%. So that because they have the big pocket and they want to kill the competition. So how does Indian players play with the giants, be it foreign player or Indian player?
I mean, you will always have that problem. Every industry, when you start building a startup, right from Flipkart, where Sachin Bansal would come out and say, it's not a level playing field, right? I mean, we're hearing this. I mentioned in my session, right, that you purposefully choose a strategy where you don't have to compete with these guys on AI talent or capital. Because it's not a winning game. I mean, as Indian entrepreneurs, we have to accept that. Just cribbing about it doesn't help. We are a fair, open, free economy. You don't expect government to intervene and sort of help you the way Chinese government would help. So just accept the reality. Build a product that they do not want to build, can't build, or not interested to build. I mean, we're doing about $50 million annually on chat rooms. I don't think Facebook cares. If they could enter if they want. And in fact, I heard they were trying to enter. But, I mean, just fizzled out. India team is not empowered. It's run out of Bay Area. So either build some things, either they can't build, don't want to build, or don't care to build. And that's your playing game.
Hello. Hi Ankush, hi Amit. This is Mayank. I'm building Epic AI. So it's a AI studio for creators and designers / marketers, creative teams to have studio quality creatives, right? The fraction of cost and time. So I had a question around, traditionally these kind of tools have been built in the Bay Area, right? But now we are seeing India opportunity, right? Unlocking. So how should we think about tapping into this India opportunity, right? What would you suggest?
I mean, you would want to find a cohort for which there's a very India-specific use case. I think an example could be, you look at all medium-sized businesses, shopkeepers in India, their creative needs are very different. The kind of creatives they want, they like, a mithai wala wants the best Diwali sharing content. None of your other tools are focused on that. I'm sure if you focus on one cohort, solve for them, you'll have a head start in building your tool. So I would say you have to choose, like, do you really want to build for India? Because it's not the most highest paying consumer. Why do you want to build? That's the first question you should ask yourself. But if you feel that that's where your calling is, you want to build for India, find a cohort which is so Indian that the global guys will not even care about it for the next 2-3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Arjun. So you were talking about how AI is going to make content cheaper, and in the next coming future years, social media in general is going to go through a big transition of a surplus amount of content which is there. Creators are looked at creators in the way they are because of how exclusive they are. But when this supply becomes so cheap, won't that bit of exclusivity change in the future in terms of monetization through ads or micropayments? Won't that also differ at that point? What is your take on this?
It is, and you go back to the same analogy, right? What happened post TikTok? Creators became abundant. It was, and I think when we are building the algorithms, right, for Moj, which is very similar to TikTok's algorithm, creator is a feature in your model, but it's not the most important feature. So the game is not just getting a best creator, which was the case in, let's say, the pre-internet era. Even on internet, when there was a follow-based graph era, you were still indexed on creators. In the algorithmic era, you were anyways off that graph. When you serve content, most algos only consider creator affinity, but it's not the most important feature in your model. So you're already in that world, and I think this will get further amplified. So I think we're already seeing that journey. You're right. The value of, or let me put it this way, number of super high valuable creators is going to remain limited while the total universe will expand. on internet.
I think the one observation maybe I'll add to that one is, and we've seen this across spaces and across domains, that the power law holds, which is I think what you were saying. So even in a world where supply goes 100x from there, there is always the power law. So, now with, like, I think Ankush, you took that example of saying like AI would probably, let's say, step one or imminently enable creators to do more. There'll still be people who will use it much better than others, right? And they will win the power law equation. But generally, the power law always holds even in a supply unconstrained environment.
Hi, Ankus. So I have a doubt. So you said that there's a 1% population in any tier 3 city you can choose, and there's a percentage of population that will be willing to pay rich amounts there. So I just wanna get your POV on two specific strategies. First is going for, say, for example, totally broad in terms of going for different specific areas, localizing for different countries because you're localizing for different states and cities and stuff, versus going for the top 10% in your tier 1 and 2 cities and trying to extract, say, much higher ARPU from them specifically. So given that you would have obviously explored sort of going for both the routes, I just wanted to get your POV on the pros and cons of each. So targeting only tier 1 and tier 2 cities and targeting the top 10% there for monetization versus targeting kind of broad in India and top 1% for each.
If you have a purely digital product, it does not matter, right? Your CAC LTV will tell you. And I think it's also better when you run advertisement on any large advertising platform that you don't constrain them on location. Just put what event you want to optimize for, get the CAC, measure the LTV, and let it be pan-India. So I think if your business model has very, very clear guardrails around how you look at monetization, you should not worry about location as such, and just let the marketing algos figure out for you.
So essentially, tell them who you want because you understand.
Tell them the event you want. And I think even for us, we've now enabled event-based targeting. So essentially, all Facebook, Google asks, what do we do when you run marketing, right? We essentially predict the probability of an event that the user will do on my app. And if you tell me your event is recharge, not like a video watch, I will optimize for recharge. And the algos are really good. It's essentially finding the probability of that event. Just very clearly tell the event you want them to be optimizing for, and the algos will do the job. So this is a very, I think, a 2010 sort of way of thinking that we will build a strategy of what users we want. Forget about that. Keep your guardrails clear. Give the algo the power. The marketing algos will figure out and do the job for you.
Hello. Hi, Ankush. This is Avi Agrawal. I'm the founder of Arcplay.ai. We are helping consumer apps increase the monetization of their apps. So I want to ask a question that we were talking about friction when it comes to increasing the monetization, which leads to drop-offs and churn. So Duolingo is one of the best case studies in the world, most talked about when it comes to gamification usage to reduce that friction and increase the monetization, especially when it comes to micropayments. So would like to learn from you that how has ShareChat used gamification as a engagement tool to drive this monetization without reducing churn?
Yeah, so I think in our micropayments usually, if it is in a social setting like we do with gifting, actually add to the experience. When I said friction was actually to get non-paying users to convert to paying users, you have to insert live experiences. That's friction for us. But once you're a paying user, paying is actually improving your experience. So if you pay a creator, you end up getting really good experience because then they talk to you, then they sing for you, and all of that, right? So in micropayments, social experiences, payment is actually good. It's only when you have to recruit or get your paying users from a free-to-use app is the friction point. So I think in most cases, you will find micropayment-led businesses. The friction is not as much as ads-led businesses.
Hey Ankush, this is Jay. I wanted to, so you had told previously that, the Silicon Valley playbook of, get the eyeballs and then you start monetizing, that generally doesn't directly work in India. Just wanted to know from you, what do you think is probably a deeper reason for that? Like, why doesn't it work?
We are a poor country.
Okay.
Look at the per capita of India and US, that's the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. I think we're at time. Maybe we have time for one last question. Then we can close.
one more question that, say for example, Indian are mostly mobile friendly user. So by any chance, or of course other players do that, so how do you read the hardware related information? Say for example, what is my mobile statistics, what all sites I have browsed, are they playing any kind of role in your algorithm building? Say whatever I have made, what is my SMS, what is my browsing history?
I think not for us, and I think over the years it's only been becoming harder to get those sort of information. I think the most valuable information for us to recommend you to content is your previous events on consuming content. And that by far beats any other static signal that I can know your age, gender, I can make you pick interest. That's not valuable. You want real-time stream of data of what you're doing, which video you're full watching, which video you're liking, so that next time you fetch the feed, my models can actually learn from that and give you better content. So one, you don't get to that data easily now. Second, it's actually not that important once you can get the user to use the app. So I think both ways it sort of works out, and we as a company don't read your SMSs and all of that in any case, because it's sort of a breach of our privacy policy. But just being like, even from a product point of view, it's not very valuable. Just saying that.
Lovely.
Hey, Ankush. Is this audible? Yeah. Hi, Ankush. Fascinating journey of ShareChat, and I really like the insight that you thought you were into a B2C business, but then you realized that it's a B2B thing. So I'm from Halen Spark. I lead the Bangalore branch of Halen Spark. We are a PR agency. So my question is non-technical completely. So see, considering that you mentioned that branding then jump to performance marketing, right? So at what stage should startups here in Bangalore or anywhere should start thinking about branding itself? From the beginning, pre-seed, seed, or where should that journey begin? So just to from the investment point of view of or VC attraction or general crowd attraction itself.
I mean, it is no one answer. It's more like at what point as a founder you want to do, and at what is the appetite of your cap table essentially. I think we have examples in India of companies who have tried that on year 1, and we've tried that on year 5, for example. It also, I mean, it's a function of capital markets, right? If with zero interest rate, nobody cares. The moment it's 5% interest rate, everybody wants to look at revenue and profit. So I think there's no one answer. I think now we are in a world where I would assume the appetite for upfront investment is much lower. So you would probably in your series A, B would want to have some revenue traction to show. But yeah, I mean, this is very, very market dependent and founder dependent answer.
Perfect. This has been a very, very enlightening discussion, Ankush. I think it gives, okay, maybe one last question.
Brand image of what the product? It depends if the previous brand image helps you, like in case of chat rooms, we were trying to build communities around our own hashtags. So it made all the sense that you brand it like shared chat rooms. Versus if you're building into a category where your previous apps don't help, I mean, you could build a new brand, and I think one consideration we have is like, because shared chat is tier 2, tier 3, and if we are building something for which we want tier 1, we try to not attach the shared chat name. For example, Moj is far more tier 1 than ShareChat, and we try to keep a distance between the two brands. So I think it depends on what you're trying to build.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Ankush, for being so generous with your time. Gives us a lot of food for thought.